Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Callum.
Not sure about that.
I may have kidnapped Callum and put him in my basement, which I do not have. Although I think I have an attic which I can't get to, and I think it's boarded up because there is that little kind of slat in the roof. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about films. Not
Was it you that boarded it up?
No, I didn't board it up. It just came. That's how the flat came. But there is the thing where there is a panel. If you look up, there is a panel that was presumably at one point an attic.
And this is our roundabout way of telling you that we are recording remotely today through and blame the British Railways for that.
But I was starting to think of it because we very nearly postponed this episode, and I was going to put out a social media post.
Well, I still think it may be postponed because I don't think we can ask Rob at this time of day to edit it. I think that's unfair.
Of course, yes, that is a bit unfair.
But he's feeling very generous. I
was going to put out a post with trains, planes, and automobile gifs and stuff, but I still might if that's the case. So that's something to look forward to in the past, because when the point you'll be listening to this, that will no longer be the present, that will be the past.
Indeed. But no, I have been stuck the other side of the county as a train line broke. The track snapped or something.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So they fixed it. I was the first train back over. I actually got back slightly earlier than I thought I was going to, which is handy. But hey-ho. Hence why we are recording now, not another day. But yeah. Anyway, on with the show. Or the show must go on. The show must go on.
The show must go on.
Inside my heart is breaking. Anyway.
Yes. No one came to hear us sing.
Wow.
They came for the nitty-gritty.
Indeed. And if they wanted some midweek nitty-gritty when they haven't got one of our episodes to listen to, a new spanking one, where might they find some nitty-gritty?
They'll find the nitty-gritty on Untitled Film Podcast, both on Instagram and Facebook. We put out a bunch of fun things, fun questions, fun stuff. And
what about X, the new fancy X?
Oh, well, I mean, we can only dream. But we're going to be dreaming for a lot longer because it's probably never going to be on X, which is just such a divorced man energy thing to do. But I did put out a post on X. On Instagram. I put out a question, and I was asking for favorite movie parodies, because today we are going to be reviewing 12 Angry Men, and it always reminds me of this really great King of the Hill episode called 9 Pretty Darn Angry Men, where Hank Hill is arguing for why his lawnmower is great and why he doesn't want it upgraded to the next level of lawnmower. And all his friends think that the new lawnmower is really cool. It's such a King of the Hill thing. So, Johnny, you got any favorite parodies in mind?
It's not like a specific direct parody of a film, but I really, I think we've mentioned it before on the podcast, love Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
That's a good one.
Which is kind of like just a general biopic. I suppose it's probably more than anything Walk the Line, but there's quite a lot of
but there's a bunch of other things. There's odds and ends of every other film biopic here and there.
I think I've said it before, I've got a big soft spot for that movie, so yeah, that's probably my favourite. But obviously The Simpsons does lots. Like The Simpsons.
Yeah, I was thinking of almost immediately of a bunch of Simpsons ones, like where Maggie's holding a hammer up to Homer, and it does Psycho dee 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 dee.
Or The Raven, which admittedly is a poem, but
yes, it's a poem. That was one of their more ambitious ones.
Yeah, there's some good stuff on there. Cape Fear.
Yes, that whole episode really.
It's genius. So yeah, no, it's good. Excellent. Do we have any responses from?
I'm afraid not. I think we may have had one that said, "Posted on Reality Records."
Good old Reality Records, always supporting us from the very beginning.
I know, you've got to love them with their many bots and their very unhelpful comments and their grammatically squiffy use of English.
Anyway, on from that. Speaking of. I don't know how I was going to segue that. I was going to go. I was going to try and segue into a piece of news, but it hasn't quite worked. Anyway, on to the news. So, Callum, what is your?
Well, there really is only one big piece of news happened very recently, very shocking, is that Paul Rubens died. Most people will know him as Pee Wee Herman, but of course he was a very prolific and celebrated actor. All of Twitter yesterday was mourning him, it seemed, and all of Instagram.
He's just the nicest guy. Like Conan O'Brien was just saying, like, on your birthday, like everyone he knew would, if it was their birthday, would just get hundreds of memes from him and stuff.
Everyone loves him. That's what I've gathered. I didn't see a bad word spoken about him. He was influential to everyone, and everybody just adored him.
I suspect why. Obviously, he had some legal troubles at one point, and I think it's probably why his career managed to sustain, because people were like, "Oh, he's just being pulled."
In a way, it kind of helped him because he was stuck doing Pee Wee Herman for the rest of his life. Shook that off, and suddenly he was an actor who could, show up in Blow and Mystery Men and numerous other adult roles. He could suddenly be an adult actor.
Exactly.
So in a way, kind of a backdoor good thing, but it's a very sad thing.
He must have had some reverence for Pee Wee as well, because obviously he went back and did a kind of.
Oh, he didn't hate Pee Wee by any means. It's just that's all he could. Once you become known as being a children's entertainer, you can only be a children's entertainer. So it gave him a sudden fork. It wasn't that it ended Pee Wee, well, although it temporarily ended Pee Wee. It's just that he could do this thing as well. And that was sort of beneficial.
Absolutely. But no, he will be missed by a lot of people, it seems. So a very sad loss.
Yes, very, very sad. Very sad. And what about you? You got me a bit of news?
I have. So there was this little TV show a couple of years ago called Loki.
Yes.
And it has a season 2 trailer out, which looks pretty good, I thought.
I think so too.
And apparently it's the most watched. I don't know if it's Marvel Studios or Marvel TV, but it's like the most watched Marvel TV trailer ever. So
really?
It's got big, which
certainly
is nice
more
to see.
Than what was the most recent one with Samuel L. Jackson that everybody hates?
The really boring one. With the scroll.
Yes.
I've forgotten its name.
A Secret Invasion? I think it's Secret Invasion. Yeah, and everybody thinks it's just Snoresville.
I feel so bad for Sam Jackson this one, because he's had all this time. He's just been like a secondary player in all these films. I know he's had some meaty-ish roles.
Sure.
And they're like, here's the TV series. This is your big thing, and it's an absolute stinker.
Yeah, I guess people realize is that the reason why he works as a supporting character is that he's can be in the background, but once you focus on people with guns and not superpowers and not colorful costumes, you start to realize, Jesus, this is fucking militaristic, boring old shite, isn't it?
I think, in theory, I still think maybe they could have made it a lot better than it was. I think it just was meant to be poor.
Yeah, I've heard
basically not good.
And again, people are speaking about CGI and stuff. There's been this one GIF that keeps popping up of Emilia Clarke growing like a super scroll kind of muscly arm, and it looks a bit wonky.
Anyway, let's draw a line through that, because that was not the news that I was wanting to talk about. Loki season 2. I thought the trailer looked really good.
Yes, and additional cast members. You've got the guy from Everything Everywhere All at Once, who's very funny, and the whole gang is back, and they look like they're having a ball and a blast.
And it does look like the bromance of the century will continue.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it too. I like this gang.
Me too. Excellent. We're just going to do one piece of news each this week because of the trains. And we will now slide into our movies of the week. And we've got 2 hip, new, modern, up-to-date movies this week, haven't we, Callum?
Oh, yes. We're bang on the money. So the first one is from the very modern year of 2020. Do you remember COVID? Well, it was from that time.
I feel like we went and saw it in the cinema.
We did see it in the cinema. I think it
must be like one of the first
cinemas were opening back up. I
think we saw that one with.
We also saw the Pickles, the Seth Rogen film. around that time.
But and also the what's his name? Australian fat now.
Russell Crowe.
That Russell Crowe film of him like driving around being crazy.
Yeah, that was quite fun.
I think that was the first film we saw out of lockdown, and I think I enjoyed it.
I remember quite enjoying it. But anyway, we're not reviewing that. We're reviewing the trial of the Chicago 7, which is based on very real life history, late 60s trial, kangaroo court sort of deal. And we're pairing that with 12 Angry Men. So we're doing a courtroom special today. We were going to do I forget, A Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey, but also Kevin Spacey and so not going to do that.
Well, originally we were going to do some Australian drama, which I thought was a TV show, and I thought it was a film, and turned out to be a TV show, and I was like, Callum, I'm not watching a TV show.
Yeah.
Callum at this point watched 7 episodes.
Yeah, of it. I did.
Can you give everyone a quick review of it? You've got 15 seconds.
All right.
So if you want to see that, guys, it's on ITVX. I think I saved Callum. Didn't even finish it. I think I saved him from himself.
Yes. Sam Neill's in it, but even he's a bit subdued.
Anywho, yeah. So, who wants to do?
I don't mind.
I'll do this.
Okay.
Sure. 7.
Sure. Take a bash.
It's the swinging 60s. Vietnam, the war is underway. In the USA, there are some people that don't like this war, and they decide to go and tell their thoughts at the Democratic National Convention. Is it? Yeah, it's the convention. Anyway, that's where they choose the.
Yes, it is
the candidate to be president. The front runner had been up until very recently Robert F. Kennedy, and unfortunately he was assassinated, and I think many people would much rather have him than probably with him we wouldn't have had President Nixon, but that's another story. Anyway, lots of youths go to make their voices heard, and it turns into a little bit of a brawl, and they pick the people they think are the 7+1, which will be more talked about at some point, I'm sure, in this review. The 7+1 people who the government want to pin it on, and a court case ensues. Callum, what did you think?
It's all right. No, that's
my bit. That's my bit. You stole my bit.
Oh no, you killed Callum. No, it is. It's all right. And that's the biggest shame, is that, for such a fascinating story, real life history, one of the biggest miscarriages of justice from that period, it should have been so much better. And it should have been so much better as well, because the screenwriter is Aaron Sorkin. But the shame is that the director is also Aaron Sorkin. And as we know, Aaron Sorkin is a great screenwriter, but what he's not considered is a great director. And Johnny, will you stop waving in front of the camera? Sorry, everybody. This a little bit behind the scenes. He's doing things in front of the camera. He's bothering me. But anyway, yes, the direction is standard. It's very flat. It's very over the shoulder, broad lighting. The writing is good, but because Aaron Sorkin is a man of indulgences, he needs someone to tell him, like a David Fincher or someone, to say, you know what, this bit's not working. Because there are bits where, so the narrative structure, they don't want it to get too boring. So they tell it in a very fragmented way. So Abby Hoffman, who's one of the arrested men, very famous counterculture figure of the 1960s, part of the narration is delivered through him doing like a stand-up routine in front of a bunch of college students, and they're all laughing. Some of it is done in the courtroom, some of it is done in flashback, some of it is done here, there, and everywhere, and it's just a bit higgledy-piggledy. It's not bad, none of it's bad. It's a very competently told story, but for such an important story, I found it quite nothingy. And considering that you have counterculture, miscarriage of justice, people from disparate youth groups and protest groups being collected and turned, first demonized, but then accidentally turned into martyrs. You have the Black Panthers, you have racial injustice, or as we were mentioning, he's the plus one. He wasn't even, he came to Chicago for 4 hours. He wasn't even really supposed to be there. He hasn't even met these guys until the indictment. And eventually, because he's not allowed legal representation, because he's not part of the seven, he gets literally bound and gagged in a very horrifying scene. But this should land so much better. And the fact is that it's all very okay. It's fine. But yeah, that is the biggest disappointment for me, is that for something that should have been so much better with the right screenwriter, the cast, you got Mark Rylance, you got Sacha Baron Cohen, you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, bunch of important and very good actors. Frank Langella plays the judge, who is a scenery-chewing villain. And even with a scenery-chewing villain, you'd think, oh, this is such a perfect movie. And yet it still becomes a bit mid. And that's the biggest sin, is that for all the talents, both in real life history and with on screen and off screen, it should be so much better. And the fact is, it just isn't. But Johnny, what do you think?
Yes, all right.
I did it already. Carry on.
I think that's it. That's the review. Yeah, it's a mess, I think, is how I would describe it. I think it tries to say too many things. I don't think it quite knows what it's trying to say. There are some very good speeches that get a bit chubby hum at times. Like you say, Frank Langella is a cartoonish villain, but I think probably too cartoonish for the story they're trying to tell. For the ending, the camera pulls through the ceiling like the end of like a college rom-com or something, but he's like bashing his gavel on the table like, stop, and it's very much like that would be like the headmaster of the college, or the dean of the college, going, hey, you kids, I told you to stop fornicating on the floor. It's almost like he's got, I'm going to tell this really important story, a massive injustice about stitching these poor kids up who are just trying to do the right thing. And also bring a Black Panther into it who were also trying to stitch up at the time massively. And we're going to make it almost feel like a bit of a college drama, like a college comedy almost at times. And there's this whole thing, so Abby Hoffman, who's played by Sacha Baron Cohen, like you mentioned, there's a bit where he's telling certain bits of it through like a stand-up show. But the way that it's kind of like intersected in, it almost like, it's very lazy in that it kind of goes, I don't know how to tell this scene in a sensible way. I know, I'll just throw that in for a bit and then we'll forget about it for 45 minutes. Then I'll throw it in for another few minutes. So it's just tonally all over the place and a mess. Having said that, there's some very good acting in there. There is some excellent parts of dialogue and it is an important story. But yeah, it could be infinitely better if, as you said, there was some discipline. If Aaron Sorkin had a script editor and a director who is a disciplined director directing it, I think it could have been infinitely better.
Oh, it could have been so much better. I also think with ensemble casts, they often do this. They pick one member to be the sort of de facto lead. So if every cast member has, say, 15 minutes of screen time each, they'll give one character 20 minutes, just so that you have an anchor around which the film can sort of be logged to. And they chose the wettest member of not only the real life group, but also the cast, because Tom Hayden, who was sort of the more sensible or kind of presentable one of this counterculture group, is, he's a college student, he wears sensible cardigans and stuff, and he's the one that tries to respect the law a bit more, even while going, oh, you should stop, Vietnam and that, oh, we don't like that. And he's a bit of a wet character, and I know that there's an arc and that he's supposed to learn to be a bit more proactive, but he's a bit wet. Also, he's played by Eddie Redmayne, who I've always found a bit of a wet actor. He's all right, but I know he's won an Oscar and stuff, but I've always found him a bit drippy. And
for a Tom Hooper movie.
Well, yeah, exactly. So anchoring the film to Eddie Redmayne and Eddie Redmayne's character, it's a shame because there's a lot more entertaining characters to his left and to his right. And I think that's a bit of a misstep, I think.
But that also, I know I kind of agree with you, and I think I was trying to think who you were going to say was the lead. But then they also give quite a lot of exposition to Sacha Baron Cohen's character.
They do at times,
flick back to him for a bit. So it doesn't really even stick that landing. It doesn't go, we're going to tell it through the eyes of this person. Yes. It kind of just jumps around too much.
It does jump around a lot.
And then those two people, there's this whole bit about these two guys, and they are both like, you know why you guys are here? It's so they can acquit two people, like so the jury don't feel like they're really mean and sending everyone to prison. And they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that's literally their whole bit. And they literally, they were like extra meat for the jury and extra meat. They add nothing to the film other than the fact they just have to have them there at the side of the screen. There is just some big screenwriting holes in this.
And their only existence is to tell one fairly good joke at the start.
Yeah.
Why are we even here? Oh, it's like being nominated for an Academy Award. Just be thankful.
And I consider this the Academy Awards of protesting, and I'm just grateful to be nominated.
Yeah. No, it is. It's all over the place. I mean, there are good scenes, there are good bits, but it should have been so much better considering everything they had. And maybe a mini series would have worked for this, just considering how much they had trying to tell.
I think that is part of it. They're trying to tell a lot of story. Having said that, the fact that it is so surface does make it quite like an easy Sunday evening watch, which probably with something as this like important and darker like piece of information, it probably shouldn't be an easy Sunday evening watch. But sometimes that is a nice place to be.
Yeah, it's certainly not bad by any stretch. It's watchable. The dialogue is fun. It's a disappointment considering how great Aaron Sorkin has been. I mean, I think we gave The Social Network kind of straight 10s. So it should be so much better considering everything about it. And
this often happens when you go, you're a really good screenwriter. You've written 10 really good screenplays. You know what? Why don't you direct the next screenplay? And then literally like Charlie Kaufman.
Yes.
What's his name? The guy that always does Chris Nolan's cinematography.
Gosh.
Anyway,
no, it's gone.
But anyway, there's quite a few people. This quite often happens when they're like, and I don't want to say stick to your lane because obviously the amount of actors who've Greta Gerwig, for example, who've become really good directors, and there are lots of writers who've become good directors, and they use the writing as a way to become directors. But it also, there's quite a lot out there who are really good writers, and they're like, I'd just like to direct it my way. And actually, maybe having a director cutting scenes out, or having a director, knowing the toolbox. It's quite a flat film as well. Like, there's nothing at all visually interesting. It almost could be a TV series. Like, it's not shot in any particularly interesting ways. Maybe a few bits of the walking down streets in Chicago, but other than that, like, it's not particularly excitingly shot or anything. And I think it would have been better with a director that's not the writer.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, I think that about wraps up our review of this.
I think so too.
And we will pause for a little advertisement break, and afterwards we'll be back to talk about a real stinker of a movie.
Oh yeah, real terrible movie next.
I'd watch that movie for $1.
Hey! I stole your line. I gave you that one. I didn't try to shout over you.
Yeah, I changed it anyway.
I know. You twisted it. You're a maverick. You're a modern day Renaissance man.
Anyway, Callum, tell us about our next movie.
So the next one...
Before I pull it apart.
The next one, 1957, Sidney Lumet. Classic. One would probably argue, I think, but we'll see what we think. 12 Angry Men. And this concerns a jury. They adjourn to the jury room to deliberate on the case of a young man who's been accused of killing his father in a heated argument. they ask the foreman goes around the room and says, and everybody says guilty. You get 11 guilties, and one man, you got one holdout, played by Henry Fonda. One holdout who says innocent. And when people kind of berate him and say, why? You think he's innocent? He says, well, it's not that I think he's innocent necessarily. It's just that we're deliberating about putting a man on death row. I just think that we should talk about it. It's just about reasonable doubt. And he's trying to be this reasonable guy, but everybody is more bullheaded than the other, especially the one character played by Lee Cobb. And throughout the narrative, it's set, the majority of which is set in this one room. It's just about Henry Fonda trying to go through all the holes in the prosecution's arguments and just put a little bit of doubt into everyone. And by one, he starts to needle through them. So, Johnny, what did you think of 12 Angry Men?
I really didn't like it. I think it's one of the most boring films I've ever seen, and all the acting is appalling.
There better be a joke here.
No, I love it. It's a great film. How'd you go in for a second there?
We're larks and japes here, larks and japes.
No, it is, I would argue, a masterpiece. It's probably the film I think that Henry Fonda is most remembered for.
Certainly one of them. It's amongst like a group of Grapes of Wrath and
Grapes.
Once Upon a Time in America and things. Oh, sorry, Once Upon a Time in the West. Sorry.
I think it's probably more famous than that. It's who's the director? Sidney
Lumet.
Again, it's one of his most famous films, probably his most famous. But again, amazing director, incredibly simple film in that it is 12 men in a room for 2 hours arguing with each other, and in that way it's basically a bottle episode, but it is an acting tour de force, and it is so well thought out. The characters, the facial expressions, the little tics, the watching how people are changing their mind, the kind of the way every character is, and kind of going like, I know that kind of person, I know that kind of person, I know that person, I know that, and how they all react to these things. And also how you as obviously one of the geniuses of it is normally in this kind of film, you would watch an hour-long court case and then you'd watch an hour of them deliberating in a room together. And you, from the court case, would come up with your opinion on it. You did not see a court case. You saw a shot of them walking out of the courtroom and the camera pulling over to a young man. And that's all you saw of the case. And the judge saying, you need to be sure you're sending this man to the electric chair, that you are sure that he is guilty within reason of within reasonable doubt. And when you go in and they first start talking about it, you think, oh, this is open and shut case. Someone saw him do it. Someone heard him scream at the person, I'm going to kill you. Someone saw him buy a knife that was the exact kind of knife that seemed to have been used in the stabbing. He said he was at a theatre or the cinema when it happened. He can't remember who's in the film and what the film was. And then slowly, this very reasonable man makes you think, well, could that person have seen that? Could that happen? And one by one turns all of the jurors. And it's just a tour de force from start to finish.
No, absolutely. And I think you've said a lot of what I wanted to say, because this is such a simple film. There's not a lot to talk about, kind of various details. So I did pick up a few behind the scenes tidbits because that I found very interesting. So this isn't actually the first version of 12 Angry Men. The screenwriter was a guy that in the 50s and 60s in American television, they would have loads of TV shows that what in the UK would have been called Play for Today. And they had like loads of these various shows that were like each episode was like, it was introduced by a narrator and then it was its own little play. So that's why.
That's what Alfred Hitchcock cut his teeth on, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. There were loads of those. And so the screenwriter wrote a version of 12 Angry Men that came out on American television, something like 1954. And apparently it's virtually the same. There are little kind of tweaks here and there just to make it a bit more cinematic. But that's why it's so coiled and tight. It's because it was meant for a TV budget with not Henry Fonda in the cast, but just reasonable television actors. And that's why the script is so tight and lacks any sort of you can't handle the truth courtroom scenes. It's because it was written for a format that couldn't afford to do that. And Sidney Lumet thought that the script was great, and he just said, yeah, let's do this as written. It's a great script. We're just,
and if we level up the actors, then
exactly.
It's going to be a masterpiece.
If we give it to Henry Fonda and Lee Cobb, then you've got nothing to worry about. Also, some direction, because Sidney Lumet was a great director, but he was a great television director. And he'd done a couple of films, I think, at this point. And he had to make little decisions because he is still in a room. So the camera begins in the film above them and in wide angles to capture all of them. And as the story goes on, it gets to eye level and then below eye level, and the camera goes tighter and tighter and tighter on them in telescopic lenses to get tight on their faces. And it just, you don't know why it starts feeling so oppressive in the second half, other than the temperatures, the temperature outside is rising and their mood is getting more angry. But it starts to feel like you're trapped in there with them. And it's just a very simple trick. It's just changing of lenses and changing of camera angles, but it really, really makes things more pressured.
There is just in general, some clever cinematography in it, actually. Every time, especially early on, they show Henry Fonda, they have that kind of almost like light his eyes up, and it kind of looks like his face is glowing, and it almost looks like he's quite angelic compared to all these other kind of crustier, grumpy old men.
It's a TV trick. They use that a lot on women in Star Trek to make them look more beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, there's they do absolutely do that. There's more. It starts off with wider shots, then two shots, then one shots, then close ups of people's faces to see what they're thinking. But actually, there's quite an important moment when everyone loses respect completely for one of the characters, and they all start turning their back on him, and the camera pulls up in a very smart way then, and to just watch that scene unfold and to see everyone's body language in that scenario is so there are some little nice flares in there, but effectively it is just 12 acting, 12 very talented actors, 3 or 4 acting greats, you'd argue, in there, just in a room, and it's
exactly.
very well done.
Exactly. And it's been done several times on stage, but I must imagine that misses the point somewhat, because a lot of why it works are those, Sidney Lumet's kind of flair with the camera, the fact that he can use it in such a nimble and sort of graceful way. It really is very almost elfin-like with it, the way he jumps around from face to face to face. And the editing is just, it's such a coiled film. It's not an ounce of fat on it. It really does.
I was watching it thinking every single moment you're drawn in. It's not one of those films where you find yourself for a couple of minutes just picking your phone up and starting and I'll just check my messages. There's none of that. Like, you're in, you're like sucked in, and like you say, there's not a second that's wasted.
No, not at all. No, frankly, it's a masterpiece. It completely earned its reputation. It's one of the great films. And actually, when it finished, I found myself thinking, I've got to pick up a lot more old movies. It's been a long time since I've seen some great films from filmmakers like this. I've got to find more of this. I was like, I need my fix, man. I need my fix. I need more Sidney Lumet. I need more Henry Fonda. I need it. I just need it, man.
Absolutely. But no, a great film.
Yes.
I think, unless you've got any more to add, I think
I think that's me done.
Excellent. So, on to the scores and a roundup. Callum, what did you think of the trial of the Chicago 7?
Very flawed. For such an important story, it feels very weightless, and it feels disjointed and scattergun. And considering the talents there, it doesn't ever amount to more than some good scenes. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to give it a 6.
Fair enough. I think that's a fair score. I'm going to give it a good old Chicago 7.
Hey.
I was kind of bumbling between 6 and 7. I do think there are a couple of performances that I really enjoy in it, particularly Sacha Baron, ignoring the dodgy Boston accent, Sacha Baron Cohen, I really enjoy in it. And I do think if you trim the fat off, it could be a pretty good movie. But it's as it is, it's just a bit so-so. So yeah, it's a scrape 7.
Yes, very much a scrape.
And 12 Angry Men.
Can we give it 12?
I was actually going to make that joke.
Really?
Ruined it.
No, it's a 10. It's a straight banger. Watch it. It's on Amazon. Watch it right now.
It's only on for a few more days as well, so I get your butt there because I'm also going to give it a 10. It is just like perfect.
It's absolutely perfect. And if it's only there for a few more days, by the time this episode comes out, if it is going to be delayed, which it won't be the time you're listening to it, because you'll be listening to it, whatever, it might be gone. So find a way you can rent it. I'm sure you can download it, rent it, whatever. Find it and watch it.
Indeed. Well, everyone, thanks again for listening this week.
Thank you very much.
Have a good week, and we'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Which is just such a divorced man energy thing to do.